WADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. here in Dakar and 7 p.m. in Abuja. Good evening and welcome to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM and online on wadr.org. First, the top stories. Senegal's ruling pastor cautions President Diomaye Faye's alleged involvement of members in new government. Muslims worldwide celebrate Eid al-Adha festival with prayers for peace and unity.
Allahu Akbar.
Tobaski is sunnah in the Islamic terms.
Nowhere in the holy teaching that you should engage in banditry.
Ghana evacuates first batch of citizens fleeing xenophobic attacks in South Africa.
Welcome to all of you. Don't be depressed. Have confidence that the Almighty has better plans for you.
And Liberia places 16 travelers under Ebola surveillance. Please stay tuned for details of the stories and more.
On the news, this is a more edit.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast and happy Eid Mubarak to our listeners outside Senegal. Well, we'll begin here as the country's ruling Pastef party pushes back against reported consultations by President Bashir Diomaye Faye over plans for a new government. The move comes as Senegal undergoes institutional restructuring with the appointment of a new prime minister and the election of Ousmane Sonko as head of the National Assembly. Francis Boniface has more details in this report.
In a statement on Tuesday, the party led by the now President of the National Assembly, Ousmane Sonko, said any cooperation with the presidency must respect the coalition's 2024 reform agenda. These include transparency in debt management, action on the rising cost of living, continued renegotiation of strategic contracts, stronger anti-corruption measures, and clarity on judicial and ministerial matters. Pastef also stressed that discussions on government formation must go through the official party channels, not individual members. The statement follows rising tensions within Senegal's ruling coalition after President Faye last week dismissed Sonko as Prime Minister. But Sonko's reinstatement to Parliament and election as Speaker of the National Assembly on Monday have intensified speculation over divisions at the top of the government. It should be recalled that the opposition parliamentary group, Takwalu, led by Aissata Tall Sall, had described Sonko's reinstatement as an institutional coup. The group has vowed to initiate a legal process in the coming days.
Francis Boniface filed that report away from Senegal. The first batch of Ghanaian citizens fleeing xenophobic attacks in South Africa arrived in Accra today, Wednesday. More than 300 Ghanaians touched down at the Accra International Airport at about 3 p.m. aboard a government charter flight from Johannesburg. The evacuation exercise, initially scheduled to begin on May 21, was postponed following a surge in requests from Ghanaians seeking repatriation, as well as logistical and permit-related challenges. Authorities say a second batch of evacuees is also expected to return home on Friday, as efforts continue to assist Ghanaians affected by violence targeting African migrants in parts of South Africa. Here is Ghana's Foreign Affairs Minister Samuel Abakwa speaking at the airport when he welcomed the citizens.
Today we send a clear message. Ghanaians have a caring government. Ghanaians are valued. Ghanaians are loved. Ghanaians are cherished. And if you mess around with Ghanaians anywhere in the world, you are mistaken. And you are making a mess of yourself. We will always care for Ghanaians because this is what you ask us to do, to serve you and to make sure we work for you at all times. And that is what we are doing. We don't want any of you to feel broken-hearted. Don't be downhearted. Don't be depressed. Have confidence that the Almighty has better plans for you. Have confidence that the Almighty will see you through. He will guide us. President Muhammad says that we should write everybody's name. He's going to make sure that a lot of the social interventions is rolling out. The 24-hour economy, the Women's Development Bank, the mass lock interventions, the Muhammad Health Program, all of these social interventions you are going to benefit so that you can all be back on your feet and you will be better and greater than you have ever been. So welcome to all of you. I thank you very, very much for all the cooperation.
Ghana's Foreign Affairs Minister Samuel Abakwa speaking at the airport when he welcomed the citizens. In Togo, fuel prices have increased following a new government directive announced on Tuesday. The price of unleaded gasoline has increased from 680 to 725 CFA francs per litre, while diesel now rises from 695 to 750 CFAs per litre. The adjustment was confirmed in an interministerial decree signed by 3 government ministers. However, citizens are denouncing the government's decision to increase fuel prices. Abdullah Hassan gives us more details in this report.
The new measure supersedes the provisions of March 14, 2025. Starting May 27, consumers will now pay slightly more for fuel at the pump price. The government justifies this adjustment by citing fluctuations in fuel prices. The price of unleaded gasoline has increased from 680 CFA francs to 725 CFA francs per litre, representing a rise of 45 CFA francs. Diesel has increased from 695 CFA francs to 750 CFA francs, and kerosene is now 1,040 CFA francs. Beneti Gagalo, president of the Togolese Consumers Association (ATC), is calling for support measures to help vulnerable groups cope with the price increase.
By ministerial decree, the government has increased the price of petroleum products at the pump. The Togolese Association of Petroleum Industries (ATC) believes this decision risks further exacerbating the economic and social difficulties faced by most Togolese, especially the most vulnerable households. Consequently, the ATC calls on the government to reconsider this decision, to open an inclusive dialogue with all social and economic stakeholders, and to implement urgent support measures to protect consumers from the rising cost of living. This increase will undoubtedly impact the costs of transportation, food, services, and basic necessities.
The interministerial decree specifies that in areas far from service stations, prices may be increased by a maximum of 20 CFA francs per litre by the Regional Directorate of Trade and Quality Control.
A report filed by our Lumia correspondent Ida Bajo and presented by Abdullah Hassan.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
In Côte d'Ivoire, the government is seeking funding for its new national development program known as NDP. The Ivorian NDP includes numerous ambitious projects aimed at strengthening the country's development. These projects include, among others, infrastructure modernization and economic transformation through industrialization. Chris Fatisha reports the details.
The high-speed railway project forms part of a broader national transport modernization strategy by Côte d'Ivoire. The government also confirmed that the 37-kilometer Abidjan metro currently under construction is expected to become operational by 2029. In aviation, the 2 international airports are planned for San Pedro in southwest and Bondugu in the east. Meanwhile, the road network will expand with more than 1,000 kilometers of new highways and nearly 6,800 kilometers of paved roads nationwide. Officials describe the 2026-2030 National Development Plan as a major turning point for Côte d'Ivoire's economic transformation. The total cost of the program is estimated at nearly 115 trillion CFA francs. 37% of the funding is expected to come from the public sector, while the remaining 70% will rely on private investments. To attract international financing and partnership, Abidjan will host the high-level advisory group meeting on July 8th and 9th, 2026. The event, supported by the World Bank, the European Union, the African Development Bank and the United Nations systems, aims to mobilize both public and private investors behind Côte d'Ivoire's vision of becoming West Africa's leading logistics and economic hub.
Chris Teacher with those details. And now talking health emergencies, the Liberian government has quarantined 16 travelers who arrive in the country from East African countries following the Ebola outbreak in Central Africa. The development was disclosed on Tuesday by the Ministry of Health during a briefing at the National Assembly. Health officials in Monrovia say they have strengthened surveillance and precautionary measures. WDL's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
President Bola Tinubu.
We'll bring you that report in our subsequent bulletin. In the meantime, Muslims around the world are marking the Eid al-Adha festival with prayers for peace and renewed calls for unity. The religious festival, known locally as Tabaski, is observed with prayers, family gatherings, and the traditional sacrifice of rams. In Nigeria, President Bola Tinubu, Vice President Kashim Shettima, and several other state governors have also urged Nigerian Muslims to embrace love and peaceful coexistence at a time of economic and security challenges. From crowded prayer grounds to family gatherings and shared meals, Muslims in the country are sharing remarkable memories. Well, here is Yechi Nusasecho with that report.
President Bola Tinubu joined Muslim faithful for Eid prayers at Dodan Barracks in Lagos State, where he urged Nigerians to embrace love, tolerance, and peaceful coexistence despite the country's current challenges. The president also called on citizens to continue supporting efforts aimed at strengthening security and national unity across the country.
We should share love, generosity to one another. Nowhere in the holy teaching that you should engage in banditry. Nowhere that you should kill another human being.
Meanwhile, Vice President Kashim Shettima, in his Eid el-Kabir message, emphasized the importance of shared sacrifice and collective responsibility in addressing insecurity, poverty, and economic hardship.
And as we enter the political phase, there is a need for maturity, forbearance, and for generosity of spirit in our political interactions. Most importantly, what binds us together supersedes whatever that divides us. And let's pray for peace not only in Borno, but in all the nooks and crannies of this country, in the Sahel zone of West Africa, and in the world at large.
At the same time, governors across different states have encouraged Nigerians to promote peace, love, and harmony, regardless of ethnic or religious differences. From Anambra to Kebbi, Ebonyi, Katsina, and Oyo states, the political leaders stressed the spiritual significance of the festival while reaffirming commitments to security, inclusive governance, interfaith cooperation, and the welfare of their people. For WADR, Yeche Nusasetu in Abuja.
Similarly, in Burkina Faso, Transitional President Captain Ibrahim Traoré has called on all Burkinabe citizens to work together in building social peace as the country celebrates Eid al-Adha, also known as Tabaski. The Burkinabe leader made the appeal today, Wednesday, after performing the Tabaski prayers in Ouagadougou alongside close collaborators in what officials describe as an atmosphere of reflection and sharing. Veronica Njaya has the story.
Speaking after the prayers, Captain Traoré praised the country's defense and security forces for what he called their remarkable and very effective work in reclaiming territory from armed groups. He also urged officers and civilian volunteers engaged in the anti-terrorism fight to remain highly vigilant throughout the holiday period to prevent possible attacks. Captain Traoré paid tribute to both the defense forces and civilian auxiliaries for their commitment and courage in protecting the nation. At the same time, the Burkinabe leader warned enemies of the nation against any attempt to destabilize the country or undermine the morale of security forces. He stressed that anyone seeking to disrupt the country's progress would bear full responsibility for the consequences of their actions. Earlier in the day, the president also sent greetings to Muslims in Burkina Faso and around the world as they mark the Tabaski celebration.
Veronica Njaya for that report. You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar, and online on wadr.org. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Senegal's ruling pastor cautions President Diomaye Faye's alleged involvement of members in new government. Muslims worldwide celebrate Eid al-Adha festival with prayers for peace and unity. Ghana evacuates first batch of citizens fleeing xenophobic attacks in South Africa. And still ahead, Liberia places 16 travelers under Ebola surveillance. We do have a guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Don't forget you can listen to us live on wadr.org and do follow live streamings on YouTube and Facebook. Well, we'll continue with the Tabaski Festival because this year's celebration in many West African countries, such as the Gambia, are taking place under the backdrop of rising prices and growing economic pressure on households. In this report, WDL's Banjul correspondent Sangdana Mendy has some reactions.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Across the Gambia, this morning, thousands of Muslims gathered in mosques and open prayer grounds to celebrate Eid al-Adha, locally known as Tabaski. Traditionally, Tabaski is marked by communal prayers, family gatherings, and the slaughtering of rams with meat shared among relatives, neighbors, and the poor. But this year's celebrations come at a time of mounting economic hardship and rising living costs for many Gambian families. Yet, behind the celebration and festivities, many Gambians say this year's Tabaski has been financially challenging.
The government will do something because everything is costly. Even to buy a shirt or trouser, it's costly.
The way economy is going is too hard. Many cannot afford. So I think it's going to hinder the celebration because you cannot celebrate to the extent in which you want because the cost, money.
Let's say you come from extended family, a parents that are a family of 6. You want to care for all those 6 children because it's the day that children, they want to put on new clothes. It is a religious fest, but that doesn't mean you have to put on new clothes. We don't even have, you can also put on your best clothes and go and celebrate the day. But to be honest, the living cost, I believe, going to hinder the celebration to some extent.
At livestock markets in the days leading up to the feast, traders reported a sharp increase in the price of rams. Many of the animals sold in the Gambia are imported from neighboring countries, including Senegal and Mali. Alaji Amat Sambu, a ram seller, says rising transport costs and inflation boost prices significantly higher this year.
If you look at the feedings we used to feed our rams, they are always imported from outside the country. The people selling them have to change dollars into CFA to go and buy the feedings, then pay for transport and customs duties before bringing them into the country. Because of all of these costs, they cannot sell them at a cheap price. Even the wheat brand sold at Bond Road now costs around $1,800 to $1,900 per sack. When traders go to buy the feedings, they also consider the decline of the dollars, an increase in fuel prices. So they add all these costs.
Transportation has also been a major concern during the festive period. Ahead of Tabaski, thousands traveled from the Greater Banjul area to provincial towns and villages to celebrate with relatives. But many commuters complained about increased transport fares at a time when food prices and households' expenses are already stretching family budgets.
Thank God we came and boarded the buses in peace. We are ready to travel, but the issue is the increase in fares. The fares are too expensive, and that is what is disturbing us. Because if you do not have around $850, you will not be able to travel. It is painful.
Religious leaders, meanwhile, are reminding worshippers about the deeper meaning of celebration. Ustaz Taha Sise, an Islamic scholar, says Tabaski is not only about sacrifice, but also compassion, charity, and unity among communities.
The Tabaski is a sunnah, which is not obligation, but they call it sunnah mu'akkada in the Islamic terms, in the Sharia jurisprudence. What it means is that it's a practice that the Prophet ﷺ did, and he said that it's obligation for someone who can do to do it.
As the day continues, families across the Gambia will gather around meals, exchange greetings, and continue tradition rooted in faith and community. And despite the economic pressure facing many households, the spirit of Tabaski remains strong.
Sangdana Mendy filed that report. But before we bring you our guest interview, let's take you back to that report from Liberia, where the government has quarantined 16 travelers who arrived in the country from East African countries following the Ebola outbreak in Central Africa, where the development was disclosed on Tuesday by the Ministry of Health during a briefing at the National Assembly. Our correspondent in Monrovia, Ibrahim Parker, reports.
Appearing before lawmakers, Acting Director General of the National Public Health Institute of Liberia, Dr. Siawata Kamana, disclosed that the 16 individuals recently entered Liberia from countries including Ethiopia and Uganda.
We have screened and monitoring 16 travelers from the affected region, which included 9 Ugandans, 3 Liberians, 1 from DRC. Liberia continues to strengthen surveillance at airports, seaports, and ground crossings.
Meanwhile, Liberia's health minister, Dr. Louis Okpoto, warns that limited financial support continues to hamper preparedness effort, revealing that Liberia requires at least $4 million United States dollars to enhance the country's Ebola response capacity.
We have limited emergency preparedness funding. We do not have an emergency fund in the budget. We also have limited healthcare infrastructure as well as limited isolation capacity and essential equipment for an outbreak.
Additionally, the Liberia Immigration Service Commissioner General, Elijah Rufus, says the institution remains committed to enforcing all health-related measures at the country's ports of entry.
People are traveling across borders, even from our neighboring countries. Others may just use porous borders to enter Liberia. So we ensure that we have this mechanism put into place in our inland checkpoints.
The legislative hearing underscores growing regional concern over infectious disease threats and Liberia's determination to avoid a repeat of the 2014 devastating Ebola crisis that overwhelmed healthcare system. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
Politics, analyses on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Well, as over 300 Ghanaian nationals arrived from South Africa earlier today as part of Ghana's evacuation plan, WDR spoke with Fred Dahu, Media Relations Officer at Ghana's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, on the arrangements in place for their reintegration. He outlined the support measures being considered for the returnees, including immediate assistance upon arrival.
Well, this very first delays has taught us some lessons and how to go about it. So we don't really envisage any further delay with the subsequent evacuations. We are believing that the second and probably the third and fourth evacuations, if possible, would all be done smoothly. Now, we do know the plan we are all working with in terms of the South African and the Ghanaian authorities. And by Ghanaian authorities, I mean our High Commission in South Africa, led by the High Commissioner, Excellency Benjamin Kwache. They are doing all the legworks in South Africa to ensure that we have smooth evacuation of our compatriots.
I know you did mention that they will be welcomed at the airport, but what kind of immediate support should be awaiting them once they land in Ghana?
In fact, when they come, we expect them to be welcomed by the high-powered delegation, as I mentioned earlier, followed by that registering them on some national ID cards that some of them do not have. So those without our Ghana cards will be registered immediately to pave way for them to be able to access basic services across government and private sector institutions. There is going to be some free psychosocial therapy offered to them by experts. The government, led by the president, has promised to give them some allowances, some money to settle down while all plans that have been put in place are rolled out gradually to fully reintegrate them into the Ghanaian society. But I can assure you that plans are well advanced to the point where we are believing that when they come, they will never miss South Africa again. Some of them have vowed never to return to South Africa, but well, that is their decision. But generally, it is our expectation that when they come, we give them the necessary comfort. The South Africans ask them to go back to their country to fix their country. We want to let them know that indeed, when these people return, they will see visible signs of the fixing that they are asking for. In fact, Ghana is not at war. Ghana's economy at this moment has been progressing steadily.
Now, do repeated xenophobic attacks and emergency evacuations risk undermining the idea of African solidarity and free movement on the continent?
Absolutely. We've been talking about African unity for decades now from our forefathers. As we speak, the data available shows that even trading among ourselves compared to other regions globally, African continent is doing woefully inadequate. And we are hoping that we can have this borderless continent, that people can have free movement, go to Nigeria, go to Kenya, be in Senegal the following week. This is the Africa we envisage. So this unfortunate circumstances really has retrogressed us by some years when we've already made some significant progress. We talk of the African Continental Free Trade Area. A united Africa is possible, but some of this myopic sentiment from these our brothers in South Africa, some of them I must put on record because not all of them are involved. Some of our brothers and sisters in South Africa leading the charge against fellow black Africans. It's totally uncalled for.
That was Fred Duho, Media Relations Officer at Ghana's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And in sport news, Senegal's President Bassirou Diomaye Faye officially handed over the national flag to the national football team, the Lions, ahead of their departure for the 2026 FIFA World Cup in the United States, Canada and Mexico. The ceremony took place on Tuesday at the Presidential Palace, where President Faye urged the team, coached by Pap Cho, to aim high and not travel to the tournament just to make up the numbers. The Senegal squad is set to leave Dakar to continue its preparations for the World Cup, where it has been drawn in Group I alongside France, Norway and Iraq. The Lions will begin their campaign on June 16, 2026 against France in New York before facing Norway on June 23 and Iraq on June 26. In the meantime, several young Kenyan athletes impressed during national trials held in Nairobi ahead of the 2026 World Athletics Under-20 Championships scheduled for Eugene, Oregon in the United States. Kenya unveiled part of its emerging talent pool at the trials at Nyayo Stadium, where several athletes secured qualifications. In the men's 3,000 meters, Emmanuel Kiporo delivered one of the standout performances, winning ahead of Elkanah Sanotua and Enoch Tutek. And we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mauro Diouf and Jacino Kapagamis for the technical support. Let's keep the conversation coming on all of our social media platforms: X, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and Facebook at WDR English. I am Imo Edet. Good evening.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Baft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to Newslink.